the Titterpigs, the RPG podcast. Am I getting paid for this one?
All right, listeners, welcome back to another episode of Titterpigs. I believe if our count is right, this is episode 14, the big 1-4. Holy hell, Scott, we have made it. This is what? We are past the 7-year itch, the 7-year times 2 itch. And I can't believe we made it this far.
We only have 30 more to go before, other people consider us a real podcast.
Yeah, we're not a real podcast yet, as my nose grows.
Right, and that's coming from fellow podcasters. Who,
I know.
I mean, it's that support in the podcasting community is tremendous. What do we do without them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listeners, Scott and I are back in the studio again. This time we have a special guest with us that's going to hang out and chat with us. Scott, would you like to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. So, who we have today to chat about his experience and tips with convention gaming is Josh Burnett, a.k.a. Bernie the Flump, correct, on Twitter. Yes. And he is also of JLHB Polytechnic, which is one of the companies he publishes his game other, and the other is Hex Games. You can find his stuff on Goodman Games website. You can also find it on DriveThru. There will be links in the description. But so let's give a round of applause for Josh Burnett. Hello. Thank you. It's a pleasure to finally get you on and have you talk about something that that's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Just a quick side note. So Josh and I know each other. We met through an online game that started, it's been almost 3 years now, I think.
Gotta be something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
Have you guys really been playing that game that long?
Not that game consistently. But still, it's only been like 2 or 3 different games.
Right, but
wow.
But the same group.
Same group, though, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple people drop out just for a minor amount of time due to work or personal things, but for the most part, everyone has kept together, and we just, everyone just kind of gelled, and we've been running that Ash campaign, the Hyperborea campaign, for a long time, and transitioned into the Isle of Dread with Andy Markham, our fantastic game master. I'm sure people listening know Andy very well. You also saw him on the other episode when he discussed one of his many passions, being zines, and so been wanting to get you on for some time, Josh, to have a chat. And this kind of seems like something that's right in your wheelhouse. I personally I didn't know that you had that kind of experience. We had a little chat at Gen Con, and you've been doing convention gaming for a long time now.
Yeah, since I was 16, I want to say.
Oh my God!
You got me.
Wow, I haven't even had a job that long. Let alone be committed to. Well, I take that back.
I haven't either.
For those who aren't familiar with you, Josh, let's turn the wheel of time back a little bit, and have you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. So, what got you into role-playing games?
So I was vaguely aware that like Dungeons and Dragons was a property of some sort. Not that I would have used the word property, but like it was a thing, a game, something. Because I grew up in the Satanic Panic, but I was also just kind of in a cultural dead zone. Mm-hmm. But I knew like D&D was a thing, and I knew it was familiar with the cartoon, and I knew like my uncle vaguely I knew played D&D, but I kind of conflated it with war games. I didn't really think much about them because actually I was a sci-fi boy, not a fantasy fan. until there was an ad in the back of one of the Archie comic versions of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's an ad, and I was obsessed with the Turtles. It would have been right about age. But there was an ad for the TMNT Another Strangest role-playing game by Palladium. I'm like, oh, that's some kind of playing make-believe thing with turtles, which I love. So let me send my 10, $15, whatever it was, off to Palladium. And I started with that. I'm in a weird outlier group that I was entirely self-taught on role-playing games. I didn't have like some other group I came in to play with, although I quickly found out from the friends I recruited in school that like some of them were like familiar with D&D, but it felt like I played Turtles for years, although in retrospect, there's probably like a year, maybe two. And then that switched into the Batman role-playing game, the little streamlined, very cut down version of DC Heroes that they put out when Tim Burton's Batman came out in '89. I played that for a little bit, and then I went straight into Champions.
Wow.
At age 14, 15. So everything since then has been really easy.
I would expect starting off with not just Palladium, but Palladium TMNT.
Oh, we totally did not understand the rules. Probably the most pure role playing hack. They're like, I rolled a hit. All right, you hit. All right, did I mention I was shooting him in the face? I'm like, oh, well, you shot him in the face. He's clearly dead. Don't bother rolling. You get shot in the face, you're dead.
Oh, well, the good news is
theater of the mind.
Yeah.
The good news is though, I'm sure there was a well-documented index for you to refer to, as there are in many Palladium games. So, you could have used, wait, never mind.
That's for another episode.
So, yep, there. Wow, is that the original one?
That's my original one with the taped background and taped spine. And
oh my God,
there's so many like rules we penciled in because like, well, that didn't make sense.
Wow. What we should do, just for the listeners, he held up a really beat up old original copy of that was the first edition too, not their second printing.
Gotta be.
And maybe we'll get a picture of it and we'll post it on the on the website.
There's yellow tape down the spine.
Oh yeah,
dog-eared corners that are just destroyed.
I was the only one that cared. I was the only one that had a copy, and like in my little town of 8,000, there was no such thought of a gaming store, much less a comic store. Was just that's insane. You got to drive off to the big city of Toledo to find one of those. Not So yeah, so that book got like passed around a lot within my little clique.
Very cool.
We took turns making characters and playing stuff.
So did you, being a sci-fi kid, rolling into superhero games, just to kind of maybe put a little bow on it, when did you discover the greatest role-playing game in the world though? Because I know that's got to be in your wheelhouse somewhere.
My grandparents got me one of the Dragonlance novels for Christmas, and I read that. I don't know exactly what made me decide to read that versus like some Bradbury or Hitchhiker's Guide for the 50th time. But I read Time of the Twins. I'm like, hey, this fantasy stuff's pretty all right. Of course, it's the first book in the second trilogy of Dragonlance, so I didn't know anything. And about that same time, like, because I had met other friends in high school outside of my immediate group that actually were D&D players, and also like Champions segued into Fantasy Hero, because I actually I played the Hero System 4th editions, the book I had, but I played Fantasy Hero for a bit, and then eventually, some of my players are like, "Hey, look, if we buy you 2nd edition D&D, will you run it for us?" I'm like, I guess so. And so I did. And I haven't looked back. So yeah, excellent. 2nd edition is really my version of D&D.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're of the same age, and, starting with some of the earlier versions, but my comfort zone would probably be 2nd edition. Keith and I just kind of, we're trying to plan a Night Below campaign just using the 2nd edition rules. And, but not, Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, because I came in, I missed the golden age of modules.
Yeah.
And I got in right as like the theater kids had taken over. Big Dungeon magazine fan in that regard. And I love the theater, and that's really probably where I'm best at, is the theater kid style of D&D.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of you in your youth, so it makes sense.
Not in that time. Those are non-existent. They don't show those. I had a real bad caterpillar face.
Oh, okay. Well, excellent. So you, I mean, like most of you've got a, you got a solid foundation, an interesting one. Keith, you can wake up. He's done talking about sci-fi and superheroes.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, now I'm back. Woo!
So let's kind of maybe we'll ease into the topic here before we get into, your general advice. I think this will be more apt before we roll into it in depth. But listener Kent has a question for you. This is Kent from the University of Numenor, who asks, what was your first con and what did you run?
So my first con was Marcon in Columbus, Ohio, which I believe it was Marcon 25 was the first one I went to, which I did not. Did I run at that one? I don't know if I ran at that one, if I ran at the next when I went back the next year. I very well may have run that in my teenage hubris. This is back when you had to like call up a phone number and talk to a guy who would put you on like a Lotus Note spreadsheet at best. Because I saw like a flyer we were in Columbus doing something, and I saw a flyer at one of the comic stores. I'm like, I want to go to this. Oh, and CJ Sherry was the guest of honor, which is my mom's favorite author, that's why we wound up going.
Wow.
So my parents took me. But it's Marcon. So like Marcon 25, 26 in Columbus, Ohio, and I ran Champions Hero System. Bunch of superheroes I wrote, because like every good comic nerd, I had like my own little superhero universe that I'd been drawing in my school books for X years. But I did that. Probably a big misunderstanding of how the rules worked, because again, it's Champions, and even if, pushing 50, I'd have a problem doing that. But superheroes and like a coalition of supervillains had stolen the Emerald Chalice of Kukulkan, and the good guys had to go find it. And then like my small mystery, following clues, fight scenes.
Right.
Big fight at the villain base at the end.
Oh, hey, that's nothing wrong with the good old methods. Point A, B, and C, and everyone has a good old time. And they definitely don't judge any con GMs after they walk away from the table. That never happens. And it led on from there. Of course, it's sarcasm, people, if you can't tell in my voice. So fantastic. Since you were 16.
I didn't run consistently because
right.
But I had that small period where I wasn't playing games at all because of bad girlfriends.
Yeah. Okay. So convention gaming, that's kind of, that's what we're here to discuss. I know I've got maybe some questions for you and opinions, and then likewise, Keith.
Yep.
All three of us in one consistency or another has run convention games. I'm sure both you and Keith have run a lot more than I have. So where would you like to begin with this? I mean, there's a general idea of when it comes to, well, if I'm going to run a convention game, it's going to, I've been running a game at my table for years with my friends and everything. All I have to do is just have an adventure, make sure it fits within a 3 to 4 hour time slot, and everything should just go smoothly. And then after I'm done, after everything's done and I'm throwing up in the bathroom because nothing went the way it was supposed to go. Obviously, there's a big difference between running games at a table, just generally speaking, and running games for a con.
Oh, yes.
Where would you like to start, Josh, as far as, as we dive into this subject?
We can start with the differences between home gaming and convention gaming.
Okay.
By home gaming, I mean any game you're playing with your established group of people. I realize, and Year of our Lord 2022 home is a really broad term.
Mhm.
But the main thing to remember is that with convention gaming, there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of rules and common knowledge that you have for home conventions that you just kind of ignore or just don't worry about in con games. Like, number one, you can get away with a lot more railroading when you're doing a one shot that's going to last 4 hours with strangers that you won't see again because they signed up to play this one specific adventure. You don't have time to just they decide to go east instead of west. It's like, well, look, there's nothing there, and we're all leaving at noon. So you can either go to the mine where the goblins are, or you can just have wasted the $4 you spent to get here. So you can do some more light railroading. You're going to be playing with strangers, so you got to be a little more just conscientious of that and what might fly at your table. Just might not fly with strangers. Like, it's don't be a jerk. Realize you're playing with people who don't maybe know your particular senses of humor, and that's a thing I had to learn the hard way. FYI. I really don't want to get in specifics, but yeah, you need to realize, like, oh, that's right. It's funny in with you have the right context, but these people don't have the right context because they've met me 5 minutes ago. So yeah.
Right.
And also you want to keep things a little, you can't really decompress as much as you might do at a home game. You have to kind of keep things going forward, beat by beat by beat, just to get things done in a timely manner so you don't have dangling plot threads at the end of your game. Also, for the love of God, don't run an adventure that is set in your current campaign with your current players, and this is going to be some side jag because I've never done that, but I've been in a game with that where, like, yeah, this is a part of our normal campaign. Half the players are in my daily group, so because then you've got people that are worried about long-term stuff versus, it's
right.
He's doing a hand, a gun to the head symbol, which is
that's
entirely accurate. Yes.
Yeah, I've run into that. I've never done it myself, but I've been in a game where the GM did that, and I'm just like,
I've blessedly only had it like once, maybe twice.
Yeah, I'm like, this is a horrible experience.
Yeah,
because it's all of a sudden like the inside jokes are coming out, and there's all this meta thing happening that I don't understand, and it's like, yeah, I'm not really enjoying this.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It's a thing, and it shouldn't be a thing.
So for convention games, you can and probably should keep things a lot more simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're doing a mystery, you can make this answer to the mystery incredibly simple and obvious and play to tropes because when the players figure out that the butler did it, they feel clever. You're not burning time dithering. This goes for puzzles too.
Mm-hmm.
You can have incredible, like I've got a puzzle for a game I'm running next weekend. It's literally tic-tac-toe. Because I've got like 3.5 hours slot and I don't need to sit there for 45 minutes while they try and figure out my very clever riddle.
Yep.
To move on.
Yeah.
So, you keep things simple.
Right.
They'll thank you. They'll enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to add, just because I've run into this myself, because I've overestimated my players. When con game versus home game, if you know the scenario that you're going to run takes 4+ hours to play, do not shoehorn it into a scenario slot that you've been given for a convention that's more than 4 hours.
Right.
Even with some gentle railroading and some nipping and tucking and some liposuction on the scenario, players will be players, and things, even if you in your mind you've cut it down to nicely fit into a 4-hour scenario slot, chances are you haven't.
The rule of thumb I go by,
okay,
and I'm probably going to slide into D&D just because that's the lingua franca of the of the hobby. I'm going to try and not use examples that aren't D&D all the time, but it's like 1 act per hour if you're breaking it down like a movie.
Right.
So, setup for a mystery would be revelation, setup, finding clues, escalation, then resolution, that kind of thing. Like 1 act per hour, or about 20 minutes per scene or encounter. If you're setting up like a set pieces and that kind of thing, maybe a little longer for like the big climactic parts of it. But I find 20 or 30 minutes per scene or encounter is pretty good estimate on what you want to fit into your time slot. I'm going to assume most conventions I've been to have been a 4-hour time slot. So that's the assumption I'm going to have going forward here.
Okay.
I used to really, really worry about not filling the time, and because people pay to generally will pay to pay in con games. Then it occurred to me, like, they're paying like $1, maybe $4 at max at Gen Con.
Right.
And I would much rather have a complete adventure than a incomplete one, where at hour 4 you're only like 2 rooms in, and the unholy artifact is still three floors down.
I think most people appreciate it, at least those who have been to a con a few times. Like, if you wrap things up, 15, 20, even 30 minutes early, they're like, fantastic. I've got time to go do something, grab a bite to eat, grab a drink, because a lot of times people have back-to-back games. Right. So I don't think anyone's really going to have an issue or go, say, you know what, I paid $3 for this 4-hour time slot and I only got 3 hours and 45 minutes. I'd like a refund. And, when people are done staring at him, like, who is this person? Then, life moves on. But yeah, so no, I totally agree with that. Focus on the content and, manage your time within that slot, but don't worry about filling it, especially if things move quicker than normal. You don't need to pad it out to the 4-hour time slot.
I have rarely had to pad things out. Right. Normally I over prep and I have to maybe not cut things, but just keep things moving along, or just maybe not throw in some plot twists that I expected.
Okay.
To toss in.
So let's kind of maybe bring it in a little bit here. Sure. So you're going to have you've got some advice. You've got a foundation. You got some things. I'm a new person. I finally got the gumption to, I'm going to run something at a con. And it's a local con. It's going to be an in-person con. And this is the other thing I'm going to, like with the D&D thing, focus more on, a physical con, someplace you're there, as opposed to an online con, which can be a different thing. So I'm going to play at, Bob's Gaming Con. I've got maybe BobCon. Yeah. BobCon.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got maybe, let's just say, 5 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks to prep. What's the first thing I'm going to focus upon once I've decided I'm going to do this? It's your standard 3-day con, with time slots, A, B, or C, for RPGs. And it's pretty much whatever you want to present. So it's not specific to genre or anything, but, what would be the first thing that, as a GM running to the con, going to run a con, that I should look for, or at least do first?
This is kind of actually a boring, administrative answer, but see how many games you have to run if you want to get in for free. See how many games or game hours or player hours you have to run to get in free, which is why I started running games at cons, because I'm a poor boy, and I could save 15, 20, $90 depending to get in for free by running X number of games. So check that out. That's usually right there on the gaming section of the website. It's all websites now. But after that, figure out what you want to run. Use a game system, or just use a game that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with. I wouldn't recommend running. I've done it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend running a game for the first time at a convention. I mean, unless it's a game you've written. I mean, that's playtesting. I get that, but like,
not a system.
The only time I ever ran Feng Shui was at a convention. I hadn't run it before. It went fine because Feng Shui is a nice, easy system, but it's harrowing and I actually wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't do it again. So So yeah, figure out what you want to run, a game you're familiar with.
Mhm.
It is tempting. You have to kind of know the gaming scene in the area, or at least how big the con is,
Mhm.
because it is tempting to run some obscure. I've been tempted and have tried to run at times obscure little indie games that I think are really cool, but in my local gaming scene here, no
Mhm.
one wants to play like Primetime Adventures or Dogs in the Vineyard at a convention. Uh, Nothing gets played except D&D and Shadowrun, oddly enough, but it's
Okay.
um so kind of noticing if in a bigger convention, it's what I like about Gen Con and larger cons like that is that there's so many people there that someone is going to be interested in something you're running.
Okay.
So yeah, be aware of just what if you want to run it, make sure you're going to run something that you're going to have an audience for.
Okay.
At the con I'm going to next week, it's a smaller con, but I know that everyone there is just excited to play any damn thing. So no matter what I run, someone will sign up for it.
Okay.
So kind of if you can kind of get an idea about what the scene is and what's gonna play. Basic marketing research.
Right. Right. So, well, I think this might another question from a listener might fit into this. So we have a question from Tony. He
Hi, Tony.
he writes in from the Tower of High Sorcery.
Oh my goodness.
So specifically, he asks, "What's your ideal table size? How many players make it too big or too small?" So, with that, would you recommend, in the same scenario, should I be aware, of how many people I should run or have at my table for a con?
It's gonna vary by person to person
True.
and game by game. My maximum anymore is 6, which is still pushing my general comfort level. I have ran for 8 or more, and it was just for me, and it was a super powered spy game. It was just difficult to keep enough camera focus on any individual player. I find that 4 to 5 is my ideal, just overall in general for any game.
Mm-hmm.
6, I think, is really kind of the maximum for me to keep focus on everyone. And then like a minimum of 3, usually, just because that has enough just diversity of skills and characters to do anything.
Okay.
But yeah, my personal is 6 is where I usually set my limits.
Your limit, your comfort zone. So
Yeah.
don't overextend, but definitely make sure there's enough people there.
Yeah, because again, you're this is a one-off. You're not going to see these people again. It's a one and done. So you want to make sure everyone. It's not like, okay, this is a Kevin centric, session, but we'll get the Steve, next time. It's like you don't have that option, so you've got to make sure everyone gets their licks in.
You do see them again. I've hidden behind corners and tables to avoid people at the vendor hall after a game many times. So, but okay. So yeah. So all right. So Keith, in our little scenario,
right.
What would you maybe think about the next step would be? So I've got my con. I've decided I'm going to run on this particular date. I've got a set number of people that I'm comfortable with. I've made sure that it's at one where I can, trade game time for free admission to save some money and whatnot, which is great. So what would you think might be the next thing as far as, and then kind of maybe, Josh, you can give your opinion on that, or if you may think otherwise.
You got your time slot. So I guess let me back up a second.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been a game runner at a con, right? At cons. I've also been a con organizer. So I'm coming at things from 2 different perspectives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So more to reiterate stuff that Josh has said, if you're going to run the game at a con, don't do what Josh did. Don't do what I've done. Don't do what most con runners have done, is run the game for the first time ever at a con. First and foremost, I ran DCC the first time ever at a con. Don't ever do that.
Ooh.
You can run an adventure for the first time at a con, but I wouldn't recommend.
No. I ran
system.
DCC the first time.
Oh my goodness,
ever
yes,
at a con. Now, granted, it was a funnel, so it's very, very stripped down basic rules, and but I did that thing. So, don't do that. My sweet spot on number of players is 5. I will go to 6. I've done it for as many as 10. That was bananas.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that DCC funnel. That was crazy. Yes, Scott, your face says it all.
My friend Colin used to run wrestling games, big time wrestling games, for like 20 people. And he'd do big, like King of the Ring,
right?
Big wrestling matches with 20 players. And it was amazing, but he's a savant. So
yeah,
and that's
some
something
people
that
are skilled at doing this.
And that's something that might be geared towards that size of people.
Right.
You're not gonna run a Delta Green scenario with 10 people.
No.
Trust me, I've tried.
I know
it doesn't work.
I would like to kind of emphasize on the know the audience. Like I have pitched games and had games put on a schedule at a convention in Jacksonville, Florida. That was not. It was a wargaming and board gaming heavy convention, but it had a very light role playing presence. So I put games that I wanted to run that I thought were fun that would have a broad appeal. Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah,
I would have one person show up for a Call of Cthulhu World War I scenario from No Man's Land. I was going to run the first of the 2 parts. I was appealing to Call of Cthulhu players, which I knew there was going to be some there, and the kind of the wargaming element that I thought it would attract. Nothing.
Yeah.
Fiasco. Nothing.
Yeah.
So know your demographics. Basic, like Josh said, basic marketing. But from a con organizer perspective, I have seen people pitch games that they know they won't get people to sign up for. They'll pitch obscure games because it doesn't matter who signs up for your games as long as you have agreed to run whatever the set number of sessions or hours, you get in for free.
Yeah, don't be that.
Don't be that guy
that's
or
a jerk
gal
move.
Or person. Don't be a dick. The Will Wheaton rule of don't be a dick.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a plea for that.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be that person. But make sure. So once you've got your game, and make sure you know what time slot you're playing in or you're running in. Then make sure you're prepared for that game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the next evolution in this kind of chain of events, right? You know what you're running, you know what time slot you're running in. Now make sure you're prepared for that game. You've read your module, you know your basic rules. You need to be prepared to explain those basic rules. You don't have to know all the nuance. You're not ready to teach all the nuanced rules to the people, to the players, because expectation is you should expect that everybody coming to your table is a newbie. They've never played the game before. Hope for the best that everybody's a veteran player, but expect that everybody's a newbie. And keeping that foremost in your mind, be prepared to explain basic rules to get through the scenario, because people are in general paying to play that game. But be prepared to run your game.
Right.
So that leads me into my next question for Josh is, Josh, what do you do to prepare? You're at that point. How do you prepare to bring that game to your players at the table?
I'm a big fan of cheat sheets for players. I'll often have them stapled to the character sheets. I'll get to that in a second. But basically just a 1-page, half-page rundown of the very basic mechanics. Roll this, add this to do this type of things. Just to make sure that everyone knows, especially if it's a game. Basically, if it's not D&D or maybe Call of Cthulhu, I'm assuming everyone is going to be brand new to the game. But yeah, so any game, it's like here's the very basic engine that the game runs on, and then everything's comes off of that. So they have something they can cheat. I've done that as just cheat sheets on the character sheets. I've had table tents that have had the same thing that also work really nice and are a neat little artifact too. Kind of the corollary of that is I'm a big advocate of pre-gen characters. Don't, unless it's something like Into the Odd where character creation literally takes 3 minutes. Have pre-generated characters. Do not waste table time putting the characters together. I'm a big fan nowadays of half-gen characters where the character is like 75-80% made, but there are still choices the players can make. Like, so maybe you've got like the class and stats for this ranger all set out, but there's like a handful of skills that they can freely choose,
Right.
just to put their spin on, or their name even, or their look, just so they can put their own little personal spin on it.
That's
so you're
cool.
you're not spending gobs of time doing character creation, but there's still some little personal touches they can add to it.
Mm-hmm.
If the characters have special powers or spells or thing, good Lord, make sure you have those printed out and stapled to the character sheet. I make little bundles like that.
Mm-hmm.
For your own, make sure you have whatever notes you might need.
Mm-hmm.
You might not, if you need the book. There are some games I've run enough I don't need to carry the book around anymore. Or if it's like DCC, I can run with just the little quick start rule book. When I'm running Quags, I can do that off the top of my head because I've run that for 20 plus years. 20, almost 20. Long darn time.
Away your age.
But yeah, make sure you have all the rules you need to run it with. I've gone through a lot of Spiral notebooks that way. I've got my Chromebook now, which is amazing for that. Make sure you bring your power cord for your Chromebook. That's also good.
Touche.
Make sure if your background, your desktop image on your Chromebook is anything scandalous, if you want to change that.
It's the little touches. It's the little touches.
It's the little personal touches, right?
Make those con games a memorable experience for those youngsters.
And then I'm a big fan of I will bring pencils. I will bring dice. I don't know why people come to gaming conventions without dice, but I always have my little pencil box of community dice. I'll usually go to Kroger or whatever and buy like a pack of mechanical pencils. Sticky name tags are nice. The hi, my name is. So you put your character name on that with a Sharpie, slap it on your chest. And now you know, like, oh, that's Grendale, the elven wizard. There it is.
Perfect.
So you can tell at a glance who everyone is.
Nice. I never thought about the name, the hello, my name is name badges, the sticky ones. Yeah. I've always done like little table tents.
Those are great too. I find the name badges are more portable.
Fair.
And require less prep for me. And then people find them amusing. It's the other thing.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
Nice. So you kind of right. So you've got the core down of the game that you're going to run. So we'll just once again we'll use D&D. So you've got some cheat sheets. You've copied over the cheat sheets one way or another. You've got these wonderful little handouts. You've got all of the materials that you need for you and your players to run the game: dice, pencils, notes if they need them, and whatnot. And then comes next, I would assume at this point, is deciding what you actually want to run. Would that be the case, or is there any more prep involved that you think would be necessary before you get to that point?
Once you figure out the game, you want to, clearly you want to figure out exactly what you want to run with that game. I mean, you'll want to do that before you make characters, obviously.
Right.
I would hope so.
Yeah. So figure out what you want to run. Years ago, until recent years, it confounded me how people ran pre-gen game, published modules at conventions. Cause why would you want to play in this game that you're familiar with? And then once I got in the OSR, that just, it's like, oh no, people love to play, Caves of Chaos, even though they played it a dozen times before. So what do I know? Nowadays I would suggest running whatever you're comfortable with. If you're a write my own adventures type of GM, then go ahead and do that. If you're I only run modules, go ahead and do that. But again, be advised, see previous points about length and timing and what is good for a 4 hour time slot.
Okay. Would you recommend, if you're able to, running through it with, if you have some friends, some players, to see if you
It's in an ideal world, yes, but that I feel is
rare.
unrealistic.
Right.
Yeah, if you happen to be if you've got the option to do it, then sure, do it. Because I mean, that's more gaming you're doing, and it's fun.
Mhm.
I'm in a weird spot because a lot of what I run at conventions is stuff I will eventually publish nowadays. So I've probably many stuff I've run already. But no, in general, yeah, if you can run it ahead of time, great. But I don't believe that should be an expectation of for anyone. That's just we're in a busy world that's on fire, and we're adults with jobs and cars and TVs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Keith, you in your history of running con games, where do you tend to lean? More published adventures or creating your own for the game?
A little of both, but when I'm running some of the bigger classic games, I will, D&D, Call of Cthulhu, DCC, I'll tend to run existing modules, right? Just because a lot of them are built not a lot. Let me dial that back a little bit. Not a lot of them, but some of them are built to be con games. They work well in a 4-hour slot. So I will gravitate towards those. Like I was reading a module or a scenario today for like Delta Green, Sweetness. That is a really short scenario that would work great as a con game. It could probably be done in 3 hours.
Right.
At the long end of the spectrum, I think. So some things naturally lend themselves to be good con games. Mm-hmm. Others, not so much. You're not going to run the Mines of Phandelver for D&D in a con game 4-hour slot. Just not going to happen. Oh. But then you have other games more in the indie scene that lend themselves to it because they're a little free flowing. They're story forward. They're narrative focused, like Fiasco or
Fiasco's a great con game. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Or things that are powered by the apocalypse. Morkborg. I mean, Morkborg can stay well within that 4-hour constraint or well exceed it. Just depends what you want to do with it.
Rotbag Sludge is a great one shot.
Oh yeah,
it's just the right size.
Yeah, perfect. It fits perfectly.
Let me toss you
running it for a bunch of tired people in England.
Let me toss you guys a question because I'm actually still trying to figure this one out.
Okay.
For a convention game, I guess as a player more than a GM, do you enjoy more several shorter encounters or scenes, or one or two just big, large mega scenes? Maybe not one or two, like 2 or 3. Because I've run into that recently with just like, oh, we jump right into this, and this whole 4-hour slot is covered with 2, like maybe 3 big set pieces, and then that's it. And it was cool, but it was just weird to me.
All right, I'll jump in. Scott looks like he's pondering, so I'll jump in.
Yeah.
For me, it's going to depend on what game it is.
Yeah.
So
right.
I love convention games that start in media res. Mm-hmm. Right. I love jumping right into the action.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care if it's an investigative game, if it's a high fantasy game, if it's a really dark, gritty game. It doesn't matter what it is. I like starting right in the middle of the action. It could be right in the middle of a battle. Bam, the camera pans, we fade from black into the light, and we're in the middle of a combat, and that's where we start. Or the combat has just ended, and we're in the aftermath of it, and it goes. And that sets, for me, that sets the tone. So a couple of nice set piece events. I don't want to say encounters because it depends on the type of game.
Yeah, that's scenes or whatever.
Right, scenes. A couple of nice set piece scenes with some smaller, like connecting interlude scenes. I like that. With like kind of a culmination scene at the end is nice. Again, I like that 3-act structure with some interludes in between. Mm-hmm. But again, it's all about getting the timing right. If the timing isn't right, connecting the dots, then you're going to bust that 4-hour window, 3.5 to 4-hour window. But if you run the bigger fewer but larger set pieces, scenes.
The one thing was like it was 3 fight scenes that each took like an hour. Woo. And they were cool. I mean, the fight was between the setup and the GM, the fights were dynamic, that it wasn't a slog, but it was just like, wow, there's nothing. It was just 3 fight scenes back to back to back.
See, I'm the kind of player, I would rather get into the narrative. I'd rather explore the story and the narrative than the fight.
I agree.
So I, as a player, tend to go look for those types of games more so. Like I will almost never sign up for a D&D game at a convention or a Pathfinder game. But that's Keith. I'll play DCC because I like DCC.
DCC, and you're going to see some wild shit.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be a little
like, even if the battle runs an hour, you're still going to witness some wild shit. It's just
it's
not
going to be 6 goblins in a room. Right. It's going to be like
it's going to be
a physical manifestation of lost time versus
I might see a spell duel in there. I'm not going to see that in Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, but again, it's expectations and what I'm looking for in a game. So that's my take for what it's worth.
So I'm going to say I prefer both, but I think this is going to come from, the perspective, not me, but someone who is experienced with running a con game. Because I think, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more later, but, prep, choosing your adventure, all those things that kind of, for lack of a better term, it's just, the substandard thing. You're going to follow these things no matter what. If you're somewhat of a decent GM running a con game, but other things to be made aware of, like the in media res thing. I enjoy that too. But I think that particular method would be something to consider if you're running a game late in the day. Because if you're running a game late in the day, more than likely you're getting a group of players who might be dragging their ass. It's been a long day. They've already been in several games. They've been wandering the trade hall floor, whatever they've been doing.
I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, they're at the tail end of the day. And if you're going through a long narrative before you get into the nitty gritty of your adventure, you may have some people drifting, not focusing and unable to pay attention. But you start in media res, you're going to get that blood boiling right away. And some people who may be tired are going to snap too. They're going to focus more initially, whereas you might lose them, in a different structure. But I'm like you guys also. I personally prefer the mixture of the narrative, structure, the 3-act. Let's build up, have an encounter, and that encounter leads to something else, and then we'll build up to another encounter and move through it. But with the one you mentioned, in my opinion, that leads to another thing when you are preparing to write your blurb for your adventure. What your selling point is for your game. I don't feel there's anything wrong when it comes to a con game to maybe give away some of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Hey, this particular game is one where it's going to be focusing, it's going to be battle specific, and this is what is going to go. This is what's going to happen. We're going to have battle to battle to battle to battle, something like that. I mean, you're going to word it differently. But what that's going to do is it's going to cause people who aren't into that to look elsewhere, and people who are really into that are going to sign up for your game, with excitement and they're going to show up ready for that. And it's not going to be a surprise to them. So yeah.
Blurbs are important. Actually, that's another bullet point I had that goes along with registering and signing up games is, let your blurb, and you're going to be limited on how many words you can use, depending where you're at, but use your blurb wisely to tell the players what kind of characters are going to be playing and what they're going to be doing. So people aren't surprised and or disappointed when they sign up for one thing and get another. Like, you are going to play, time agents, and you're going to be traveling to 3 different eras to go track down renegade serpent men or something like that. That's so the players know what they're going to be doing and what to expect. Don't spoil or don't really get too precious about, quote quote spoilers.
Yeah.
Right.
Let them know what they're getting into. Because then you're going to attract the kind of players that want to be there on top of everything else.
Right.
Well, that goes to the marketing It's again, know your demographics. And this is Keith, the con organizer and the con game runner, GM. It's know who you're marketing to. If you want people that are excited or interested, at least baseline interested in your game, you need to appeal to them. I was trying, like my example earlier when I was telling you I was trying to appeal to Call of Cthulhu players and war gamers that might be interested in a World War I themed game at a wargaming stroke board gaming with a little bit of RPGs thrown in event in Jacksonville, Florida. I pitched it that way.
Right.
There just wasn't enough interest. I didn't have enough players to even make it a go and had to sack the game before I could even start it, unfortunately. But it's all about the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a good elevator pitch. And like Josh said, don't worry about spoilers. I mean, don't give away everything. Don't tell them they're going to go fight, have an encounter with Azathoth or,
right.
this big bad, demi-lich or whatever it is in your scenario. But, if you're going to go time hopping, tell them they're going to go time hopping.
Right.
People are interested in that or not interested in that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Or even, this is an adventure which leads to this, and it ends with the culmination of you're fighting a big bad guy, which if you're a 5e player, that there's going to be at least an hour and a half or longer, moment of combat in the story. So they're aware of that. And that may be too much for some people, but right. I do believe, and we've said it before, a key thing in running a con game is time management, not just yours, but the people at your table too. Making sure that, that they are willing to invest in something like this that's going to hold their interest. Classic example was I was at a con, and as cool as it sounds, running a Call of Cthulhu horror game that starts at midnight sounds fantastic. Not if it's a long, strung out investigation with no action. And suddenly you're looking at your clock or your watch, and it's felt like 5 hours went by, but it's only been 40. And you're like,
40 minutes in and somebody's snoring. Yeah.
This would have been fine at 2 p.m, but at midnight, oh my God, we're all just trying to be as nice as possible to just make it through. But think time is also something to consider, when you're dealing with your game, I think, as far as the time slot is concerned. So
Josh, to follow along with this question, we got a game, we're running a game, and you know what you're running at the table. You've pitched it well. You've got a group of players at your table. You're in the middle of your game, and our next question comes from everybody's favorite GM, Andy. Everybody loves Andy. I love Andy.
Yes,
he's lovable.
He is. He's a lovable guy. But Andy asks, how do you handle, and this has always been a thing that I contend with both as an organizer and a game master. How do you handle problematic gamers at a convention table in real time? And by problematic, he specifically points out I mean rude, obnoxious, scene hoggers, inappropriate comments, rules lawyers, and the like.
Mm-hmm.
And this doubles. So before you answer, let me throw this in there too. This doubles with another listener's ask. James Drucker, who's getting ready he's one of the organizers for CamCon in Kamloops. I think they're in British Columbia, Canada. James will tell me, he'll slam me if I'm wrong.
James Canadian?
He's Canadian. Yeah.
Let us know in the comments.
But he's been asking us, since he knew we were going to have you on the show, some practical advice for him, for his GMs, because he's running the game convention happens in 2 weeks.
Right.
So, and this is one of those things that can be really helpful to him and to his cadre of GMs.
So blessedly, I haven't had too many problem players, although I've had some. So this probably comes from my. This isn't going to be the best advice, but just given I'm a wishy-washy Midwesterner who hates conflict, so part of it is if you can suffer through it for depending, and it's all on levels. If you can suffer through it for 3 hours, like Thanksgiving dinner, and it's just someone being irritating rather than offensive,
Right.
just suffer through it and go and move on. Again, I'm a parochial Midwesterner, so that's just my basic standard. Some of our feisty East Coasters might have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, see, I'm an East Coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scott's pointing at me.
I'm a Midwestern. I'd hate to cause a scene. Good Lord. Could you imagine something so terrible? Yeah. So if they're seeing hoggers, the best thing to do is, I mean, and this is just something you do as just being a good GM in general and anything, is swing the focus to maybe more of the quieter players and say, what do you do? This is happening. What's your, I mean, not throwing the other person on the bus. So like, okay, so that guy just spent 10 minutes monologuing to the Archduke.
Mm-hmm.
So you swing to like, okay, Abernathy, you've just seen Glendale, giving his piece to the assembled crowd. While that's happening, what are you doing? And just make sure you're swinging that focus to everyone at the table, but especially to maybe people who are a little not as socially forward.
No.
And that goes if you're a player too, is if you're a player,
right,
engage in the other players.
Right. I'd like to touch on that in a bit. Player etiquette. So we'll kind of maybe focus on that a little bit more.
If they're being outright toxic or offensive, you can call them out and like, hey, we're trying to keep this a friendly family game. Maybe you want to tone it down a bit. And especially if you got people at the table who are notably upset, you can kind of get a coalition that way, do the whole, we're trying to do a thing and you're what you're doing right now. It's kind of ain't cool, man. Maybe the gay elf trope isn't proper to be doing in the
right
in the second decade of the 21st century. Yeah. Or at all. But, yeah.
Do you have a horror story of something? Not in length if it's too much. But
nothing to be honest. I've been lucky enough, and I try to keep my games. PG or PG-13 in general, just to because I'm gaming in public, so I'm not going to get too crazy. Horror games notwithstanding, which have their own kind of special thing, but for the most part, I try and keep my games pretty above board so they avoid anything trouble. And I've been lucky. I haven't had too many terrible players. I have had some people, Gen Xers, who something was not necessarily right 20, 30 years ago, but a comedy tropes that were common 20 or 30 years ago that have not aged well. You come to realize that that's not cool to do.
I don't know what you're talking about. Go on.
Sometimes all it takes is just a rolled eyes like, come on, man.
Right.
And they straighten out.
Mm-hmm.
Rules lawyers are going to rules law. That's
right.
That one you just kind of push through and like, well, this is a con game. We're not going to, I'm keeping things streamlined just because we've only got so much time. So don't worry about the attacks of opportunity if we flew that off.
That's fair.
Or I'm going to judge this way. I'm not always going to judge this way, quote, but I'm going to judge it for now this way is my other favorite quote.
Right.
This won't always be my decision, but for now we're going to do it this way.
Okay. And I think that question involves, I think probably pretty much kind of the last step. So you're there, you're at the con.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've heard stories of obnoxious scene hoggers and whatnot. So you've got that rolling around in your mind on how to deal with that. So you're just kind of maybe prepared, you never know who's going to be at your table ever. But your current concern though right now is you're there. So setup, execution, how are you going to be dealing with these people? And dealing maybe the wrong term, but engaging with them at the table. So what do you do now that you're there? What's your process, or what would be your recommendations?
Unfortunately, like safety tools became kind of the part of the zeitgeist right before COVID hit, and then I haven't had a real big chance to experiment with those.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a fan of the X card or safety words
Right.
type of stuff. Or even just approaching, it's like, hey, at the beginning again, like this is the game. It's gonna involve murder. There's gonna be just almost like a very quick session one. It's like, hey, I try and keep this game PG-13. There's gonna be kidnapping and murder and maybe some addiction scenarios in this adventure. If there's anything like that, let me know, please, and we'll avoid it. If something happens that's triggering, let me know, and we'll work through it. I want to be a friendly table here, so give them give them content warnings for lack of anything, which we used to just call a movie rating, and suddenly you change the name to trigger warning, and people get all
triggered,
get all opinion about it.
Right?
Like, man, we just called that a rating back in the day.
Right.
Adult situations.
PMRC and music.
Right.
It may contain adult situations.
Right.
No, but yeah, I'll let them know, like, this is kind of what some of the tropes might be in the game.
Mm-hmm.
If it's anything uncomfortable, please let me know. Or, if you totally didn't realize that, investigating child murders is going to be part of the game, you want to nope out. Totes fair. Get it.
The title of your adventure was the horrible cases of the child murders.
I mean, I ran a game that was investigating child murders, and because fairy tale monsters were being troublesome.
Right.
I did not spring that on my players. It's like, no, it's like, no, something's been killing the children in the town of Steubenville. You guys got to go fix that.
Right.
So when you do your pitches, going back to the marketing and your pitches for your games, do you put that content warnings or those labelings in the pitches?
Maybe not actually called out as content warnings, although arguably I should, but at least in the actual description of the pitch, I will say like I did with I can't remember, it was a Hobomancer game. I can't remember what it's called, but something has been killing the children of this town. You're there to stop it before it happens again. So I mean, they know going in there's going to be
right. Okay, so it's worded in the pitch.
It's directly
itself.
worded in the pitch. There's bad shit's going to go down.
Okay, so it's not like trigger warnings X, X, and X, but it's in the.
And that's
the
not
verbiage.
a bad idea. I just haven't I haven't done it, and it's perhaps I should.
Right. And the only reason I'm asking is because I have seen it in both virtual and real space or meet space, whatever we're calling it these days, conventions. I've seen it done both ways, in the elevator pitches and as a supplement to the elevator pitches as content warnings or trigger warnings, and then pop.
On a purely artistic level, I like weaving it into the pitch just as part of the flow.
Right.
I certainly don't mind seeing it just called out CW : spiders.
Right.
I think as long as you get it out there directly and unmistakably, however you want to weave it in, I think is fine.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are like too long didn't read. They look for that content warning first and then go read the pitch.
If you're going to Cave of the Clown Spiders, you probably should have a good idea on what.
Yeah, there's going to be clown spiders.
I mean, they read the title, and then they're like, if the title looks appealing, then they look at if it's a listing that has title, pitch, content warning, they're going to read the title. If the title looks appealing, they're going to read the content warnings. If that doesn't throw them off, then they're going to read the pitch. I think it's
Right.
kind of a three-way sequence, personally.
The problem is the short descriptions. You've only got like sometimes a Twitter's length of
It just
space
depends.
to put into it. So it's many nowadays seem like they have a short description and a long description. The long description will definitely, be a little more upfront.
I know there's going to be a few people that we know personally that are probably going to be yelling at their headphones, whatever, because as we know, the safety tools, not necessarily the topic itself is touchy, but the usage of them. Like you said, you have no problem with the X card, you have no problem, with drawing the veil. The description.
I'm a big fan of lines and veils. I mean, that's kind of older school Vincent Baker stuff. Older school, God Lord.
Right. Yeah.
Vincent Baker used to be the new guy.
But there's gonna be people though who feel differently, and that's fine.
Yeah.
They want, their recommendation would be, no, you need to have a detailed list of every little thing. But
that's
that,
valid. And maybe I should. I'm still learning.
But then that kind of rolls into a player etiquette situation.
Yes.
Sure, it's the responsibility of the game master at a con to provide a safe environment, so to speak, for you and your players to engage and have fun. But I see a lot of times that, players feel that they put more of the onus of a situation like this on the GM. Whereas, like you'd mentioned, if you had just taken the time to read the description or read the title, or even if something didn't make you feel right, reach out to the GM, because usually I would imagine when you offer up a game, do you have some sort of contact, an email address or something if someone needed to? Maybe not, but
theoretically, I think I've been contacted all of once.
Right.
But before a game.
But I mean, still, we are men of certain age, and the times they are changing. And so the expectations sometimes may have gone one way and we just haven't caught up yet. And so with that, it does feel like that, I've seen scenarios of people, I've gone to such and such con game, and, they didn't tell me that there was going to be jumping spiders, even though jumping spiders was in the title. Well, you didn't read the description of the game, or you saw that, this was the horrible adventure of, the hobo children murders. And then
again, that's why at the beginning of the game, I'll do the quick little rundown, like, hey,
okay, there you go.
I want everyone to we're all here to have fun. I don't want anyone to be distressed by what happens. So, here's what the game's going to be about. There might be some of this, there might be some of that. If you have an issue, please.
Yeah.
Let me know.
So that's part of running the game. So yes, setup, readdress the game again, right? Make sure that and maybe a little bit more information when you're there, more than your blurb, just to make sure everyone's in on the game.
Yeah. And you can check in too, like, especially if you're doing like a bathroom cigarette medication break in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, everyone's still cool. Everyone having a good time. Everything good, clean, cool. All right. I don't feel you have to make a big formal deal about it. Just general, like, hey, checking in, making sure we're all cool. Everyone's good. Yeah. Good. All right.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just going to say, it's a good, that bathroom break is all, about mid-session is always a good point for people to have that 5 to 10 minutes to decompress. If there is an issue, they can have a moment to step away and decompress, or say something to the GM. It's always that a point of, like, non-committal point in time where they can go, hey, I wasn't cool with what just happened, or, without making a scene.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that time where somebody can feel a lot of times it's a point where they feel they can say something without making that scene.
Because again, nothing worse than making a scene in public.
Right.
Thing that could happen,
especially for Midwesterners. I mean, I'm from New
Ohio
England.
It's like,
I'm an East Coaster, New Englander. I have no problem going, you know what? Go fuck yourself. I mean, that's just part of my vernacular. Right. Welcome to Titterpigs.
This strongly worded letter and put it at the bottom of my desk for 3 months.
Right. When someone says, you know what, something. There is an issue. Well, can you email it to me? Because I don't want to deal with it right now.
Yeah.
But
me.
So, but I mean that once again, I know, and I think this might even be an entirely different subject, but back to player etiquette, there's nothing wrong with, hey, even if you're halfway through the game, if there's a break and you go, you know what, I don't think this is for me. And I'm just going to excuse myself. And that's should be acceptable on both ends. I mean, and, but that's still on the player. I mean, engagement, like you have here, execution and involvement, one of the talking points you want to get to, being aware of your players, one person in the corner may seem a little uncomfortable. So that would be a good time to maybe, have that break and talk to them. Everyone else seems to be engaged, but, even for the person who doesn't seem like, this may not be their thing, there's no harm in going, hey, this, I'm just gonna bow out here for whatever reason. And, take that involvement. Involvement is a two-way street at a convention table. I think shouldn't all be on the GM's shoulders to, corral, this rodeo of cats at all times. It needs to come from both ends.
I've had it happen, and they didn't elaborate on why they left, other than it just wasn't for them. And I felt like kind of felt like kind of crappy afterwards. Mostly I felt sorry that I possibly, and I don't know that I did, because again, they didn't elaborate that. I may have inadvertently done something that was unenjoyable for them.
Right.
But I did take that time later on to, assess, my actions and see what I could do to change and otherwise. And so, yeah.
Well, you would much rather have that than someone telling you, hey, did you just see what this person at your table just posted on Twitter? Saying that they're taking exception to your game and therefore, something's wrong. So, and then, that's a whole different type of imposter syndrome going on.
I've had that happen too.
Oh no. Well,
yeah, no. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, and like that is how you learn and grow. Is from, it wasn't on Twitter because it wasn't a thing at the time, but still, it's from forums. But yeah, you got to take your lumps and acknowledge where you've made mistakes. I did not engage with that because that's the last thing that needed was for me to come into that stream and like defend myself.
Right.
That's not gonna help anything. I took the valid criticism and assessed and adjusted for future.
Right.
Well, that's good. At least you.
And it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't anything horrible. It was just basic behavior.
Right.
Fair.
See before player hogs.
Fair. But at least you could take the criticism whether you liked it or not.
Yes.
And you could take it for what it was worth and learn from it. And then that's what being human's all about, is learning from our mistakes, others' mistakes, everybody's mistakes, good, bad, or indifferent. Not even mistakes, just learning from others and applying those things and growing and being a better person, and then bringing the enhanced version of you back to the table and making everybody else's experience a better experience the next time. And then the next time it gets better and better and better.
So you've, I know we've kind of, without going too far off of the hypothetical, Josh, to maybe kind of reel in a little bit, and then, maybe just a couple more things. But so you've got your game rolling, people are having a good time, and you've set everything up, and you're on your break, time's rolling along, and everything went well. Everything went well, as far as you know. And do you feel that something such as an assessment, just not like, what you think of my game, everything's good, but I mean, if you want to improve, do you feel something such as that would benefit some people? Because I've seen some people do that. Hey, hop on this and tell me what, I did. And I've even seen, certain key points, rate this from a 1 to 5 so I can do that. Is that too much?
I've never considered that before. As a knee-jerk reaction, that sounds too much like making my fun hobby into
A
a job.
Right.
If you're part of a demo team for someone,
Okay.
absolutely. In fact, I think some companies do that.
Okay.
For me, I can't imagine doing that other than the most informal chit chat post game. What did you like? But yeah, like more formalized like that.
Mhm.
Maybe I can't see myself doing it because again, that sounds onerous.
Right.
Are you familiar with the roses and thorns model of feedback after a game?
No.
So roses and thorns, as I understand them, and I forget who the kind of the initiator of it was. But I have been in game experiences that use it. So roses and thorns, like tell me one good thing, the rose, tell me one bad thing, the thorn of the game I just ran.
Oh yeah, Lloyd does that.
Okay.
Lloyd, yeah, our friend Lloyd, and
Oh,
listener
Lloyd,
Lloyd.
love Lloyd. That does
Lloyd's
sound like
fantastic.
that
Oh,
does
you
sound
know
like
Lloyd,
a Lloyd
that's
thing.
right.
You are right. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So
Love
Lloyd is
me!
a big, yeah. Lloyd's a big advocate for roses and thorns. So Lloyd, every time Lloyd runs a game, he'll be like, all right, we're going to do roses and thorns. Tell me one good thing, one bad thing about the game session. It's not like, tell me one good thing or bad thing about me as the GM, but it's just one good thing, one bad thing about the game session.
Yeah.
It could be about the rules. It could be about the style of game. It could be about him as the GM. It could be just the game in general. Could be anything.
I can see the value in that. Again, for me, that sounds too much like yearly self-assessment at my job, and that just
Okay. Yeah, I was just asking.
No, I am absolutely willing to be convinced otherwise on that because I can
Fair.
absolutely see, but yeah, just like oh,
Right. So
Okay.
is there anything that you feel that we didn't touch upon here? You know, as far as just kind of like a general breakdown of, you know, from deciding to you know, run a game at the con to the conclusion of, you know, your game, whether it was successful or not, and you've had either bumps or hitches and you've dealt with them one way or another.
I think we want to talk about like actual player etiquette for a little bit.
Okay.
On the player
All right.
end.
All right. Well, we'll touch on that for a couple moments here because we're about at the 120 time marker. Yeah, I know. It's well, no, as clearly stated when we brought you on, we have three gents here who could babble for 4 hours on this. But that means I have to edit that. No, thank you. But yeah, player etiquette. I think briefly, I'll just kind of run down a couple things. Is of course, you know, when you're looking for a game, make sure it's something that's in your wheelhouse. Look at the details of it all. You know, and then once you're at the table, you know, engage in your GM. You know, there's a certain amount of just, you know, general oh god, what's the term I'm looking for? You know,
there's
just
player expectations when you get to the table. Like
right.
Players should, at least in Keith's humble opinion,
mm-hmm.
Being from both sides of the screen here, when players come to the table, ideally they shouldn't be the barfly sitting in the chair. They should be active participants, not passive participants.
Right.
They should be courteous of the players.
That's it.
Around the table. They should be respectful, not only courteous that there are other people at the table, as far as not being scene hogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or rules lawyering and thus becoming hogs of everybody's time, but they should also be respectful of everybody around the table.
Yeah.
And everybody, you know, and sensitive to everybody around the table. You know, Josh, you made the comment about, you know, the kind of the trope of the gay elf thing in 2022, right?
Mm-hmm.
That went away of the dodo bird in like 1980.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
yeah.
You know, we don't need to see that at the con table in 2022 or ever again. I mean,
yeah. Or anywhere.
Or anywhere. It doesn't,
yeah.
Even in a home game. You know, those kinds of things, at least from my perspective. What else can you add, Josh?
So make sure feel free to like try a game that you're absolutely unfamiliar with, or that is maybe something you wouldn't normally do, but make sure you're signing up for a game that you want to play. If you don't want to be there, don't be there. Yeah, engage with the other players, especially if they're strangers. Like when I sit down to play, I like take note of the player to the left of me and the player to the right of me. I take note of all the players, but especially the player to the left, to the right, and then figure out what they do and engage with them on that. It's like oh golly, Mr. Magic user, like, you think you might, is there anything you can tell us about, this strange ring that's on fire? Yeah, engage with the other play, because especially if playing with strangers, there's a kind of a instinct to just talk with between you and the GM and not talk with anyone else at the table. But make the effort, because that just enhances it for everyone, and especially maybe if they're quieter players and you might be a little more gregarious. I was running a game at our Gen Con several years back, and it was a sword and sorcery game. And my players walked in. First one was just some dude, looked like you or I or anyone. And then the other 5 players walked in, and they were all wearing business suits and luchador masks. And I'm like, oh, this could go either way.
Oh, geez.
Those guys were the best players I ever had. First off, they stayed in character as luchadors the entire, like, their characters weren't luchadors,
Right.
but like it was luchadors playing a sword and sorcery game.
Nice.
Which immediately they had the whole brotherly comrades in arms thing down.
Right.
But they just brought, like, the other guy who wasn't part of the group, they brought him in. They're like, hey, good job, dude guy. All right. That's an awesome move. Hey, let's see what this guy could do.
That is awesome.
It was amazing.
Right.
That is great.
So yeah, so you can bring positive energy to the table and almost be a scene stealer without actually stealing the scene, if you're bringing the whole table into that, and not just hoarding it for yourself.
Be the kind of guy people like to play. They're the kind of person people want to play with. And
right.
Yeah,
Scott,
and then we'll talk about you on a podcast 10 years later.
Luchador, yes. I just want that in my everyday life. I just want to show up at my IT job, with the luchador mask on and a suit.
Can you see me showing up at a government staff meeting in a luchador mask?
Once. That'll be the end.
Show me in the documentation where this is not allowed.
Right. So that's, yeah. So, I mean, I kind of feel like, because we're actually going to be doing more of like a player etiquette episode at some point in time, just general player etiquette. So a lot of this will kind of, wrap around that situation, but there is a special way to, conduct yourself, with some, dignity and respect when you are a player at the table, and not just sit there and feel like, this person running the game owes you, every red penny of that $4 to $15 that you spent. And if they didn't, provide that to you, then you're gonna, just, want a refund. It's like I said, it's a two-way street, and maybe that's my Midwestern, sensibilities coming in. Even though I'm from California, you can take the Hoosier out of Indiana, but you can't take Indiana out of the Hoosier.
Stop.
Hey, I bought 2 of those Hoosier GM shirts. I should have bought 5.
God, you're horrible. You're horrible.
But yeah.
All right,
so,
we have one last listener question, so we can wrap this up.
Let me read it. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm nervous now.
Well, I mean, I was gonna read
okay,
it,
go ahead.
Oh,
but it's got no, go read it, but it's got to be in the form of a convention question. So
I'll let you do it then.
All right. So this is from our good friend Nate, who writes to you from the maximum security prison up in northern Maine. Josh, what is the average airspeed velocity of a laden swallow if he's running a game at a convention?
See, running it in Africa or Europe, I guess, would be the.
And there we go. Thank you, everyone. Good night. This has been Titterpigs.
Monty Python game. No way that can go badly.
Yes.
I'm throwing my money at that one.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So, before we wrap up, Josh, where can everyone find you? Not just, you on the social medias, but your games. You are a prolific, game designer, writer, and all sorts of wonderful things. You've been in both sides of everything, not just running games, but creating them and selling them. So where can they find you and these wonderful things you've done?
So Hex Games is a game company I'm been part of for several years. It's where I've met some of the best friends I've ever had. That's where we do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just but a small part of it. They're the maker of Quags, Hobomancer, And more recently, I've put out Leighton Connor's Akashic Titan stuff and Steve Johnson's Tales of Lusty Minotaur stuff. And then my stuff that's pretty much just me and a couple other people is JLHB Polytechnic, which is where Crepuscular magazine comes from, Dungeons and Draugrs and Draculas and all that stuff. And that's all on RPG Now, and some of it's on Itch and some of it's at Exalted Funeral.
Okay. And do you have anything coming up?
I am currently working on the long-awaited Crepuscular 2, Triumph Over the Grave, which is the second issue of my DCC-centric fanzine. This one's going to be in full color. I'm very excited about it. That should be out. Supposed to be out before February because Zine Quest, the next Zine Quest starts in February, and I've got stuff on the kit for that. And then I'm also currently working on Sword Bastards, which is my it was supposed to be a fantasy satire and just became fantasy the way I run it. I'm actually going to be running that at Archon next weekend, which will be exciting.
Excellent.
Fantastic. All right.
Well, there we go. I'm sure, just like with anything that we do on Titterpigs, everyone's going to agree 100% with what was said on this episode.
Well, why wouldn't they?
And exactly.
No
I'm
exceptions. A very clever fellow.
So we'll transcribe this as a how to run a game at a con. So
definitive.
We'll put it out as the Titterpigs definitive guide, according to Josh Burnett.
Broke no discussion or dissent.
Excellent.
Good day, sir.
Well, thank you, Josh. Really appreciate you taking the time. Would definitely like to have you here. Have you back on again, for Please. Other things that are in your wheelhouse. And look forward to in getting more involved in all the wonderful things that you do. So
thank you.
Anything else, Keith, you'd like to add?
I just want to say, hey, from the East Coaster in the room, thanks for being here, being part of Titterpigs for this episode. As somebody who has intimately run conventions for years, although I'm on hiatus right now until Scott and I decide we're going to do TitterpigsCon.
Yeah.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing what you do to run cons at games.
Yes.
Run games at cons. God, I can't talk anymore.
That too.
Yeah. And to entertain people and, so thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you on behalf of all of our listeners.
Yes. Take care, everyone. Hello, listeners. Scott here. Hope you enjoyed that episode. I just want to take a moment to let you know what's coming soon from Titterpigs and also some changes to our coming schedule. Unfortunately, due to Hurricane Ian, we've had to reschedule our chat with Ken Haidt about alt history and gaming. We are hoping to get Ken back on real soon, probably near the end of October, and get that episode out to you as soon as possible. Coming up next, though, we will be talking with Parable Games about their popular horror RPG, Shiver. After that, we'll be hoping to get Flagbearer Games in to talk about their historical RPG, Nations and Cannons. Someone may want to talk to Keith. I think we're seeing a historical trend here. Anyways, just want to close with a reminder to all of our listeners that if you'd like to make a comment about the show, drop us a recorded message, suggest topics, or even see about getting onto an episode of Titterpigs, please drop us an email at titterpigspod@gmail.com. Thank you one and all for listening, and until next time.